here we are with Hart Lambur, co-founder of Across Protocol and also of UMA. Welcome to the Defiant podcast. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Cami. So good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. Okay, so let's get to know you a little bit and your background and what Across is. And then we'll go straight to the news of the week, which is that Across was added to Uniswap and what that means. We'll also talk about, I think what's probably the biggest issue or one of the biggest issues in Ethereum right now, which is interoperability among all the flourishing layer 2s out there. So that's for a bit later in the conversation. But yeah, for now, let's just start with your background and just briefly on what Across is.
Totally. Yeah. I want to talk about how we unify Ethereum. I think that should be the rallying cry here. But okay, background. Canadian, studied computer science a while ago. I'm on the older side for crypto and for DeFi. But studied computer science, worked in finance for 8 years through the financial crisis. Which, I mean, there's maybe something to talk about. A lot of the market structure concepts that I saw there are reflected in the Across design and this intent architecture. We basically are taking some of these like financial concepts around RFQ systems and kind of market makers and implementing them in a much more fair set of rules, which I think is kind of interesting. Did that. Had a fintech startup that got acquired by an asset manager and then started going full steam into Ethereum, starting with the UMA protocol in like very early 2018. And so UMA is best known for being the oracle that Polymarket uses to resolve prediction markets. So think of it as an oracle for long tail data. Did that for a while and actually out of UMA spun Across where sort of 2-3 years ago, before there were all these other technologies that existed, we were looking to communicate between blockchains using the UMA Oracle. And that actually led to like an internal hackathon project for Across. And that grew into its own protocol, where Across is really focused on this intent based bridging architecture, where we are trying to have extremely fast, like 2-second fill times between rollups and Ethereum mainnet.
Very cool. Before going to the conversation's topic, just like briefly on what it's like to run two companies or two startups, or like how involved are you in UMA and Across, or like what's your role in each?
Our team. So we have like a team that is cleanly split in terms of who's doing what, but we also are like cohesive. So it's a very interesting and good question. When you kind of look at the architecture behind both protocols, the common denominator is that we are writing rules in smart contracts on chain, and we are incentivizing off-chain actors to follow those rules on chain. So it's maybe a bit abstract, but there's a lot of common architecture, mechanism design, and infrastructure that the two projects share, but we're applying them in kind of distinct and different ways. So it works. It's been working for us, and it's been pretty fun. And it's cool right now to see Polymarket in the news and for us to be able to support them. I'm not totally sure when this podcast will go out, but the election in like a week today will be the biggest test of the UMA Oracle and of Polymarket. And I feel very confident we're going to succeed in that, but it's pretty cool. And then Across and solving this interoperability problem, solving this problem of how we unify Ethereum. I mean, that's been really motivating and exciting because I think that there's an architecture that we're really excited to contribute to the broader Ethereum ecosystem. I think it works pretty well, and I think it's a very, very important and critical problem, as you've even tweeted about recently too.
Definitely. So. Yeah. Like I said, I think it is probably the most pressing problem for Ethereum right now. Okay, so Across is all about unifying Ethereum, making transactions seamless between the different L2s. And of course, one way that a lot of people interact with Ethereum is through the biggest exchange, which now also has a wallet, Uniswap. And Uniswap recently integrated across. So how does that look like? Like, what's the, significance of this integration?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so Uniswap is a team that I've known since the very, very early days. And we've had a long relationship with them, which has been great. But Uniswap, in their web app, in their wallet, in their mobile extension, they need a way to have users move assets between chains. That's just like a critical must-have need for them. And they want this to feel like the Uniswap experience. So they're really, I feel like one of their many contributions to crypto is good user experience. So how do we make it seem smooth and seamless and easy? And they like this intent architecture. They're developing single chain intents with Uniswap X, which they announced EthCC year and a quarter ago. And they really want to follow the same design pattern with cross-chain interactions, which we've been working with them on. So what does the experience look like? The experience looks like you go to the Uniswap app. It's very deeply integrated. So now when you go to swap ETH, you can move your ETH to a different chain. And it takes on average about 3 seconds. It costs pennies and takes 3 seconds to go between chains. And that's using the cross intent architecture to move those assets between chains, which we can get into how that architecture works in maybe a little bit. But it's designed to be this just incredibly cohesive, coherent experience to let you move assets between chains. I will say that this is like the first step. You still see too many different versions of Ethereum on too many different chains. It's still confusing. We haven't yet solved like that kind of balance abstraction part. But in terms of, hey, I'm on Arbitrum, I need to get assets to base, you can go to Uniswap and you can do that. It's really cheap, takes 2 seconds, and it's seamlessly integrated.
Again, just to get everyone on the same page, this is to move assets across Ethereum layer 2s. Like, this is not about moving assets across different blockchains. It's for the Ethereum ecosystem.
Correct. Uniswap, there's probably a little bit of wiggle room there. Like, will Uniswap deploy to Monad? I actually don't know, but the answer could be yes, but it's another EVM L1. Mm-hmm. Would this support going to that chain and back? If Uniswap made that choice, yes, it would. But you are correct. We're primarily focused on connecting EVM-centric chains. I guess Polygon is another good example. Polygon isn't an L2 exactly, but it's connected here. So these EVM-centric chains are connected in the Uniswap app through this integration.
Cool. And then, so one aspect of what makes, I think, interoperability difficult within Ethereum is, bridging within chains. I think, like a problem I have is like, how do I know which bridge to go to for like going, I don't know, for optimism or for base, or like just like having to like step away from what I'm doing to search for a bridge, and there's like many different bridges, so like having to pick which one is the safest, and am I in the right website, am I gonna get scammed or phished or whatever. So like that solves that problem. So like bridging is inside of Uniswap, and having it be just like a fast, cheap experience is great. But then like the other problem, and I'm not sure if like this solves it, is the need to have like the layer 2's native token to pay for transactions, or like to pay for gas. So it's such a pain for me to do that because it's like, okay, I receive some like stable coin in Optimism. And now I want to send those stable coins to my Ethereum wallet, but I can't do that because I don't have OP. And now like maybe that the stable coin or the token that I got isn't supported in the chain that I want to send it to. So I need to swap that and also have the token to pay for gas. So it's just a nightmare.
A mess.
So I don't know. I don't know if this solves it or if that's kind of like a separate problem.
There are related problems here. And I'm trying to think in my head how to structure this podcast. So we like are like, okay, how do we like link up all of these related problems? But let's try to enumerate them. So first off, let's back up actually, because let's make this be like pro Ethereum for a second. Ethereum had a scalability problem 4 years ago. You had one network, ETH mainnet, but we're like, okay, it can only do so much and it's going to get expensive. And then DeFi summer happened and it got crazy expensive. This problem became very visceral, right? And the Ethereum ecosystem aligned on a path to solve it, which was the roll-up centric architecture. And then we had different teams innovating in different directions under that architecture. And they developed these great roll-ups. And I think following Dencun this year, when blobs were introduced, everything became fast and cheap. And I think now any individual L2, once you are on that L2 and you have the right assets, you have a Solana-like experience. It's fast and cheap. It works great. So like, go Ethereum. We solve scalability.
Yes, really it's true. It's like, okay, the reason why we're having this problem is because we solved another huge problem, which was scalability. So I think you're right that it's good to step back and acknowledge and celebrate the progress that's been made. And like scalability was a problem for Ethereum forever. Probably since the mainnet launched, it's had this problem. And it went through so many iterations to try to solve it. Sharding and then other kind of roadmaps and all of that that was scrapped, layer twos. So I think totally right to acknowledge that.
Yeah. And you and I both like lived through that. It's like, how are we going to solve scalability? What are the different things? And then like, okay, align on roll-up centric architecture and like did it.
Yeah, and it's here.
Rah, go Ethereum. Queue up. Okay, new problem, like you just said. And
of course, it can't ever be so simple.
It can never be so simple.
Yeah.
And so the new problem is now I have all these chains. Okay, let's try to enumerate all the problems. How do I see all my assets on all these chains in a way that is like understandable and digestible? What if these chains actually operate with different gas tokens? That's another problem, right? So it's like, okay, wait, I don't even know if I've got the right thing to use the chain in the right spot. Okay, so seeing the chains, having the right asset on the chain, and then moving assets between chains. And what Across is focused on is the moving assets between chains. And we are specifically focused on the moving assets between chains really, really quickly. And I would argue that if we're going to have the unified Ethereum experience that is actually usable to the next billion users, we need to have a UX where I can see the assets I have on the chains I have in a digestible way. I think that's like a hard UX problem. And then I need the ability to spend the assets that I have on whatever chain I want to spend them on really quickly. So it feels like just a cohesive, unified experience. It also has to be cheap and secure, by the way. So like those two other things we put it, like, don't forget about. I don't even think on this podcast we'll talk about security, but I think it's like critically important. And I have very strong views on that. Cheapness, I'd actually argue that in bridging now, we've gotten so cheap, we're kind of there on the cost perspective. The thing that we are most focused on is the speed. And so this is one of a number of components that are required to really make Ethereum unified. But on speed, I'll make the argument that it actually has to be like 2 seconds fast. I've been saying this 2 second number, and some people look at me kind of crazy, like, how did you make that up? It's a little bit made up, but it's also based on a lot of like Web 2 UX research. Google will tell you, they've written a bunch of reports on this, that if a website takes more than 2 seconds to load, bounce rates just go up. Just users just start closing tabs and going into doing something else. And there's kind of this like psychological perception, I think, that if you are waiting for more than 2 seconds, you're wasting your time, and you get kind of antsy, if you will.
Especially when you're like transacting on chain, I get super nervous. Like I'm like, did I do something wrong? Where's my money? Like, am I gonna lose everything? You know, so it's like, yeah.
Yeah, even you go back to like early e-commerce stuff where like you type in your credit card and hit the pay button, and like if it just took too long, you're kind of like, do I click it again? And then you'd have those weird warnings, which is like, don't click it again because you might get charged twice, like stuff like that, right? So I really do think that the Web 2 experience we have to deliver is this like 2 second like experience, and then past that, we actually want the 200 millisecond experience, which is 200 milliseconds is like the limit of human perception, something that you can't really perceive. It feels instant. So to me, there's these two hurdles on speed. There's 200 milliseconds. Do you want to get there? But more immediately and realistically is this 2 second experience. And across today, our median fill time on transactions less than $10,000 between L2s is 3 seconds. So we're like getting close, right? And we have a path to get there, particularly if like L2 block times get a little shorter. Okay, so yeah, like enumerating the problems we got to solve. It's like a UX problem of in the wallet, where do I see my assets? There is actually a separate problem that you touched on. What if I don't have the gas token on a chain to do something? And that's kind of an account abstraction problem for us to solve. And then there is the, how do I move assets between these chains in this 2 second like experience? And that's where Across lives. The other ones, the account abstraction, there's a new EIP that's going to make it into the next Ethereum hard fork called Denkun. There's a new EIP called 7702 that is Vitalik's upgrade to another one called 3074. It doesn't too many numbers, but I think that's going to help us solve the gas problem you talked about.
How will that be solve it?
So this isn't my expertise, and I don't want to go too deep on this, but effectively you'll be able to sponsor transactions like you can with, there's another kind of chain account abstraction standard called 4337, where I could pay for gas using a non-gas token. Like I could pay for gas using USDC, or I could have somebody else sponsor my gas. There's very interesting gas sponsorship things there too. And this might be getting like a little too deep, but there's also very cool ways that you could combine this type of account abstraction with cross-chain intents, like what a cross does, where I could have a home chain where I have my assets and I use intents like a cross plus account abstraction like 7702 to remote control a chain from my home chain where I have my assets.
And that would be like, you would just pick a chain to do that?
This is a thing that I think is hard to predict. Like where are users? Let's paint two worlds. One world is a user interacts with 100 apps. Each of those apps is their own chain, and the user has funds on all 100 apps, right? And then they sometimes need to move money between them to balance them, but they have funds on all these 100 apps and are spending from them. That's possible. There's another world where I pick a home chain. I'll call it like this is an American product, but like Venmo is like a way to send money in the States. But I pick a home chain that's kind of like my default spending account. Maybe it's Unichain, maybe it's Base, maybe it's some other chain. But I keep all my money there, and I never really send money to I do actions on other chains from my home chain. And so I never really send funds to those other chains. That seems cleaner in one sense. I think the reality is probably somewhere in between the two, where I keep funds on a relatively small number of chains. Maybe those are the chains I use frequently because it's a little bit cheaper if I'm natively spending gas on those chains. And then there's like 50 other applications that I rarely use, and I never actually send funds there. I just kind of do this remote control thing to like execute a transaction on the other chain.
Protocol 20 introduces Sorbonne, which is Stellar's cutting-edge smart contracts platform. This creates new surface area for innovation and provides new opportunities for developers to build protocols and products that create access to everyday financial services. So it means a gradual increase in transaction capacity and a chance to fine-tune applications. And it's the most transformative upgrade to the Stellar network to date. Woohoo!
Do you think that would be like a wallet having to implement something like that? Like, because like how would a regular user interact or access that that UX or that experience of like having funds on chain and then like interacting with intents on other protocols or dApps? Like I don't think like a normal user would be able to just do that. Like somebody would have to create some sort of interface, right?
Totally agree. I think where that interface lies is actually a bit of an open question. But like let's make an analogy that I think most of the viewers or listeners would get. Like let's talk about like a Web 2 shopping cart. So if I'm building a store in Web 2, I browse my store, I add stuff to my shopping cart, and then I go to pay. And when I go to pay, I'm presented with like payment options. Where do I want to pay for this from? So do I want to pay for it with Apple Pay, Google Pay, my credit card, maybe Amazon Pay, PayPal, whatever else? I have different options, and I pick them and I pay and I move on with my day. One way that this could get one sort of design pattern here is, let's say that my app chain is like a chain with NFTs or like digital goods I can buy. Then maybe we kind of replicate a similar flow where I like pick my goods, put them in my shopping cart. There's some nuance here where like, do you have the shopping cart concept? But like work at the high level, if we kind of like zoom out, I pick my goods and I go to pay, and maybe that app presents me with a unified way of where I could pay for it from. So that application wants funds on their chain, but I could pay for it from Arbitrum, Optimism, Base, Polygon, ETH mainnet, other options, right? That seems like a very like usable design pattern. And that doesn't require a wallet to do anything in that kind of framework. And then maybe you get more sophisticated. Maybe that actual checkout thing, because they can see your account balances on all these chains, it actually suggests intelligently where it thinks you should pay for this from. And so the user doesn't even have to pick a chain that they're paying for it from. It just has the like pay now button.
Right.
Just to take it a step further, you could also imagine that entire kind of experience actually getting built into a wallet, where like the wallet, the application does nothing. When you click the pay button where you're going to pay on their chain, the wallet pops up, like MetaMask pops up and says, you know, do you want to pay for this from Arbitrum, Optimism, Base, da, 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 da. And when you hit the pay button, it all happens and flows through. How does that sound to you as a user? Does that sound like a reasonable type of experience?
I think so. I'm thinking, you know, like, so like in a concrete example where I want to buy a meme coin, say, on Base. So I would go to a DEX there. and click, I'll buy this meme coin with ETH. And in the buy button, say I don't have like required funds or tokens on Base, but I do have them in like Ethereum mainnet or I don't know, somewhere else, Arbitrum, whatever. So I go to the DEX, like see the like swap thing, click buy, and then the idea is that I get the option of buying with my assets that I have on the chain where I do have like the required assets, and then like everything would happen in the background. Like I wouldn't have to worry about sending tokens to Base or like having like the gas token there.
Yeah, it's a payment system, right? I in like across is kind of the 2-second move fund part of that payment system in this version you're talking about. The open question is that payment system integrated in the application that's kind of like helping you do that, or is it integrated in the wallet, or both? Right? I frankly think like both are going to integrate stuff like this, and we're going to figure out which design pattern works best. But you know, your example is exactly right. I want to. One maybe kind of nerdy way to think about it is there is like a block. There's a transaction I want to buy on a chain. So that transaction could be, you know, buying an NFT, or it could be like depositing an Aave or whatever it is. There's a transaction I want to buy on my destination chain. I want the ability to pay for that transaction from anywhere else, maybe in any other currency. Those are different questions, right? Do you want to do the swap or not? But I want to be able to pay for it from other chains, maybe pay for it in a different currency. And I want it to be one click, and I want it to be 2 seconds.
Yes.
Right. So, like what we're trying to build is the 1 click, 2 second, pay for it from any other chain. How that gets integrated could be at the application or at the wallet, right? And, you know, we are definitely not there with L2 interoperability right now, but there is a clear path of how we could, like, we can do the 2 second payment thing here. We don't have all the UX stuff kind of worked out yet.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we have the payment, like the cross-chain transfer of tokens, right? And you were saying that account abstraction can help with the sending like tokens to other chains?
Yeah. Okay. There's like, I want to know how let's talk about how intents work for a second. And then this will be like this is a pretty cool, like where we're going in the future. So, for people that are just listening to this, I'm going to try to not talk with my hands too much, but if I'm talking with my hands or saying it out loud, you want to move value between two blockchains, between blockchain A and blockchain B. The kind of classic or traditional way you might do that is you send funds into a contract on blockchain A. You wait for finality on blockchain A, which takes time. You then send a message from blockchain A to blockchain B. That message might take time and or might introduce other security assumptions. And then you release funds from blockchain B to the user on blockchain B. Okay. Biggest problem with this is it's slow because you have to wait for finality on blockchain A, or at least a high degree of finality on blockchain A. What does the intent architecture do? This is what Across has been pushing for now for a couple of years. Don't send a message and don't actually wait for finality. So like make it really fast. How? All right, user sends a transaction on blockchain A, which is a deposit into an escrow account. So their user funds on blockchain A are going to get locked up. That transaction broadcasts the intent that they want to do. So the user is saying in that transaction, I want to get I want to move 1 ETH from A to B. Then lean on a network, a permissionless, open network of third-party actors. We call them solvers, relayers, fillers, market makers, kind of the same word for different words for the same concept. those third-party actors race to fill the user on blockchain B with their own funds. So they go and they send the user the 1 ETH on blockchain B out of their own pocket. They can compete to see how much finality risk and how quickly they can do this. So they could actually do this almost instantly if they think the user deposit is safe. And they're professional actors or professional-ish, amateur professional actors that understand like finality risk and don't make it easy for the user. So the user gets this incredibly fast fill, this like 2-second or less fill. They move on with their day. And then the protocol, quote unquote, verifies their intent, that the intent was filled before they release the escrowed user funds to the solver that filled them. So I didn't answer your question, but I just want to lay this groundwork. Does that part make sense?
It does, but how are solvers, like what's the incentive for solvers? They get a fee to do this?
They get a fee. So the fee is pretty small. It's like pennies or single-digit basis points, low single-digit basis points for this fee. So, if I'm the average size transaction between L2s is about $50 on various bridges, and this fee is like 2 pennies or less.
Okay. And how are those fees calculated? Is it like a flat fee or is it a percentage of the transaction?
There's a fixed cost component, which covers like gas costs of like the transaction to send to the user on the destination chain. And then there's a variable cost component, which is based on the size of the amount of money being sent.
Does kind of the number of solvers competing affect cost at all?
There's different architectures or designs here, because you could imagine, how are you having these solvers compete? Are you having them compete on speed? Are you having them compete on price? Or maybe you're having them compete on like some combination of the two. So right now in the across design, we are having everyone compete on speed. So the fee is kind of set at a suggested fee, and whoever gets it done first gets the fee. And this kind of looks like maybe block building on Ethereum, where the wallet suggests a gas fee that the user should pay. And then like different block builders are competing to include your transaction. So that's kind of the way we're thinking. We're using across right now. However, you could absolutely have the solvers compete on price and say, hey, you got to fill this within a minute, but who's going to give me the best price? And you like run an auction to say who's going to solve this at the lowest price. Both of these designs are useful, kind of different use cases, and there maybe there's ways in the future to combine them. Okay,
and can anyone be a solver? Like who's participating there?
Our solver network, there's kind of like a meme on Twitter that's like, it's just Wintermute that like solves all those transactions. And as far as I know, Wintermute is not involved in our system at all. Our solver network is remarkably grassroots. We have about 25 active solvers. As far as I know, only like 2 of them would be considered like professional. 2 or 3 of them would be considered like professional shops. They're mostly like, the kind of guys that are like solo stakers that like want to run infrastructure. And it's actually pretty cool. They do a lot of volume. And Risk Labs, like early on, we did run a solver and we continue to run a solver. Ours does not, only does, I think, 7.5% of all transactions. We do some of the higher volume transactions, but we are like a small factor in the overall network.
What about like the long tail tokens that maybe like none of the solvers have to pay out of their own pocket?
Yeah. So our system is focused on what I'll call like major assets. So ETH, USDC, USDT, DAI, those sorts of things. I do think that the long tail assets could be trickier here because it could be less capital efficient to do that. Though one solution is you just move the major asset and swap on the destination. Like there's a Uniswap pool on the destination to swap to my long tail asset. I actually think that design pattern makes a lot of sense because I'm of the opinion that most assets should like stay in their native spot. And you can just move money to that native spot and swap in to go buy it. But this is like, we'll see where this goes and see what the use case is for bridging long tail assets.
Nice. Okay. Okay. And this broadly here is how intents work. And we're talking about like this specific integration with Uniswap, but thinking, as how can intents be incorporated in the Ethereum ecosystem more broadly? Like what does that look like?
This is where I actually gave you the whole background without answering your question from a while back, which is, okay, so when in this architecture, if I had assets on a home chain, let's say it's Unichain, I had assets on a home chain and I wanted to go and do something on Cami chain, right? This intent architecture shows how a third-party solver will go and like send 1 ETH to me on Cami chain, but that solver can also execute code at the same time they send you that ETH. So they could be like, okay, here's 1 ETH on Cami chain, but swap it or buy this NFT. And they could go and do that. And so this goes back into this like checkout experience, where you could imagine on Cami chain, you have an integrated experience that says, okay, I will sell you this NFT where you can pay for it from any chain. And it's 1 click to move the funds and execute that code, which I think is pretty cool. But it doesn't do everything yet. So this is where the account abstraction stuff gets exciting and kind of points towards an end game. So the solver that executes the code on Cami chain can't execute like a permissioned action where like if it's supposed to be my account on your chain, a third party can't execute a permissioned action from my account.
Like buy something, for example?
So buy something, many buy actions aren't permissioned. Like anyone can buy this thing. So, but it would be like, let's say that I won a jackpot. I won the lottery or something like that. And I have a bunch of money in my account on Cami chain. A third party can't go and spend that money, obviously. Like they've got to have my approval. And when you start thinking about some of this account abstraction stuff and like what's happening with 7702, we actually would be able to create a signature. I could give you a signature that would let you spend money out of my account on Cami chain. Even if I had no gas money, no nothing there, I could give you a signature that would let you do that. And then you could imagine we could use this intent architecture to like bridge the gas money to then execute that signature. And then it feels and looks like a remote control for that remote chain. Okay. So from my home chain, I can execute any action on the remote chain.
It's like giving like someone else a power of attorney to go in kind of another another chain to do whatever you want to do.
You're giving them a signature that says you can do this thing over there.
Okay.
Right.
And then with account abstraction, okay, so intents together with account abstractions allow you to perform different actions on chains where you don't necessarily have assets, and including transacting without a gas token. You can go and send funds or buy something or open some collateral position or whatever you want to do without actually having funds already there in that chain. Yes. And without having the gas token.
Yes, you're basically saying, to use your power of attorney analogy here, so on my home chain, I have funds on my home chain, and I say, here's a power of attorney to go execute this thing on the other chain, and I'll pay for it from my home chain. Here's the money to pay for that thing. Solver network, go do this, right? And then they go and they do it quickly, right?
Hey everyone, I'm Ilya, and I'm inviting everyone to Bangkok, November 9 to 11.
You've been duped into thinking anything decentralized was ever gonna work. There's a better way. Stop wasting your time with all this blockchain and go back to the norm. Get a latte and stop trying to change the world. Oh, and this thing in November, Redacted, the hackathon, they're cushy office jobs out there, you know? Everything is working as it should.
For our special event, Redacted. We're going to dive into AI, we're going to dive into Web3, chain abstraction, decentralization, and user-owner AI. I'll see you there.
Yeah, that would be a huge improvement from the current situation. And I think, like, just to bring it to Web 2 UX, I feel like what's happening on Ethereum now, it's like as if, I don't know, like it's hard to find an analogy, but it's like, imagine if like you needed some sort of like special asset or like permission or something to interact with each Web 2
app.
I think
it's almost like maybe what you're trying to say is like, imagine I'm going to like Amazon to buy something, and it requires me to go to another website to buy like Amazon dollars.
Amazon dollars, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's like if you want to do like a like on Twitter, you need like, first to do that you need a Twitter token, but even to get the Twitter token, you need kind of another token to pay for that. So it's like two steps removed, and it's like what I think like we need to kind of step away from our crypto bubble and just like acknowledge how foreign all of these concepts are to 99.9% of the population. Because whenever I like using the mom example is kind of cliche, but literally, like when I try to show my mom, like I'm trying to get my mom to like, okay, like buy some crypto and just put it in, like get it to earn yield somewhere, like just do a little bit of like DeFi, and just like explaining it to her. It's so hard, like for someone who's like not in this every day, to like even like understand what this all means, and just like to understand the concept of like, why do I need a different token to do this? Like it's so foreign. So I think it's really easy when you're like in crypto all day to just like minimize all those frictions, because we kind of become used to them and just like immune. But I think like we all need to acknowledge that the state of UX right now is unacceptable. Like nobody will use it. And so, I think it's like we're all working towards, we want to change the financial system. We want to change the internet, make it more decentralized. But to do that, we need to make it usable. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Like all the technical innovation in the world, like if people can't use it, can't understand it, it's not going to matter.
Totally agree. It's got to be one button click, done in 2 seconds.
But the good news is there's at least like the building blocks towards that future, right?
Yep. So we go back and we're like, okay, like what across can do today without account abstraction is we can do the remote control in one direction. Like we can execute code on a remote chain, provided it's not permissioned. We can do that today in 2 seconds. So it's like that building block is there. We can't go the other direction. We need like 7702 or account abstraction to really make that go both ways.
What do you mean? The other direction?
This is where if I wanted to, the power of attorney concept. So right now I can pay somebody, I can pay a solver network to go and execute code on a remote chain that doesn't require power of attorney, that doesn't need my signature, that like anyone could execute. So we can do that today. We need account abstraction like 7702. And I mean, there are ways you could kind of get there today using like, if you had a smart contract wallet on the remote chain, but I'm getting too complicated. But we need a way where I can give power of attorney to then go and execute any action on the remote chain.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Okay. So right now we have the building blocks for some actions, not all.
And we don't have the UX concepts all figured out. Like what does the UX in an application or wallet look like to enable this? How do we make it just be one button click? And there is open questions about, does this get integrated at the wallet level? Does it get integrated at the dApp level? Is it somewhere in between? But like, again, we do have the building blocks to get there. We just need to focus, align, and like execute.
And then for account abstraction to allow for executions for all actions, is that, you said that's an update that's going to be included
in the Petra hard fork. Yeah, in the Petra hard fork coming up in Q1.
Okay.
So it's not that far away.
And that means that with that hard fork, then wallets and applications will be able to integrate this. It's not like it'll be automatically usable.
Yeah. So what's happens here? So you could, if you had a smart contract wallet on a remote chain, like not a normal EOA. So if I had a smart contract wallet on a remote chain, I have the building blocks to do everything we're talking about today.
Okay.
But most users on remote chains have EOAs. So one way to think of what this 7702 standard does is it upgrades EOAs to have some smart contract wallet-like capabilities. So with that upgrade, then I'll have the power. I have this power of attorney concept to any account.
Okay.
But you are correct. Even with this hard fork, we first of all need all of the L2s to adopt this, because the hard fork is on Ethereum mainnet. It's not necessarily on the L2s. So the L2s have to adopt this. And then we need like the wallets and other infrastructure providers to also adopt this. And so there's hard work of coordinating and aligning people of like, is this the right way to do this? And like my push here, actually, it's a reasonable segue. We've worked with Uniswap on a standard for cross-chain intents. It's called ERC 7683. There's too many numbers in this podcast. And so if you're a normal listener listening to me say all these numbers, I apologize. But let's put the word around it, intents. So we have a standard for cross-chain intents. I would like to gain as much support as I can because this standard is not about a cross. This is not our product. This is just an architecture, an open, totally no vendor lock-in, totally open architecture for how to define a cross-chain intent that Uniswap likes, the Optimism team likes, the Polygon team likes. We've actually got a good amount of support for it. And my kind of push into 2025 is to say, okay, this intent architecture is a pretty damn good way to unify Ethereum with this 2-second interop experience. In order to make it complete, we also need an account abstraction standard like 7702. Can we then align on a design pattern, kind of like we did with the roll-up centric roadmap? Can we say, hey, here is our roadmap for interoperability that is going to combine open standards in a way that gives us this cohesive, unified Ethereum experience?
Seems really hard to get so many different parties to align. What do you think it'll take?
I think it takes credible neutrality, right? So it's got to be like, hey, this isn't owned by any one team at all, which is where I think the EF, the Ethereum Foundation, can play a role. And then, I think it is hard, but like Ethereum can solve hard problems. Like that's totally possible.
One just like more specific question on account abstractions and like wallets having to integrate this hard fork in order for it to work. Is it like as easy as, pushing an I don't know, like an update in the wallet, or would the user have to do anything like migrate their funds somewhere? Like how easy is that transaction?
This is beyond my expertise. So, I mean, adding stuff to wallets is tricky because they care a lot about security. So, for good reason, wallets changing how they work, it should be a slow process.
Yeah.
And we're talking a lot about this 7702 account abstraction standard, which is, again, not my expertise. It doesn't require users migrating funds. It does require users basically allowing a delegate contract to have some permissions over their account. So there will also be like an onboard, like it's a one-step onboarding flow for 7702, but there will be some UX work around that.
Because that's the other issue. It like all of these, you have like the building blocks, and some are on their way, but they're there, But one, like you need all of the different players in the Ethereum ecosystem to adopt the same standards. And two, in some cases, you also need the user to do something for all of this to work.
Yeah, but again, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. It's like, okay, every L2 ecosystem does actually want seamless interoperability. And it's not just within their ecosystem. They want it from anywhere. So if I'm a new Arbitrum Orbit chain and Arbitrum wants me to be an Orbit chain, right? They want that new chain to be able to onboard users from anywhere in Ethereum very quickly and easily and seamlessly. So there is an incentive here where like every L2 ecosystem wants seamless interoperability from everywhere else. If there is an architecture that is lightweight, sensible, not owned by any one team or project, then I do think that there is a path where people are like, oh, this makes sense. Like, we don't even have to do anything necessarily, but let's be supportive of this architecture to try to like deliver this 2-second interop experience. And then like the same is true for account abstraction. And, you build some critical momentum or mass that some momentum that this is the right direction to push in. And then, I think you're all like, okay, cool. Ethereum's unified now, right? Does that sound overly naive and simplistic? Yeah, probably. But there is, as you've been pointing out, like in the podcast and in your tweets, Ethereum has an acute, very real interoperability problem. We've got the building blocks, let's solve it. The less we can bicker about like little things, the less there can be like L2 ecosystems warring over stuff, the better. But maybe the solution is just like, I kind of look at this intent architecture as this thin layer of abstraction that actually benefits from all the other innovations that ecosystem teams are doing. So that's maybe another topic of conversation. But Optimism Superchain and Polygon's egg layer and Arbitrum chain clusters, all those technologies actually make intents cheaper to deliver within those ecosystems. So yeah, I'm kind of bullish that there is a path here where everybody's like, yeah, this makes sense and it solves a hard problem. Let's push down this standard centric version. Again, much in the same way Ethereum pushed down the roll-up centric roadmap to solve scalability. Can we kind of have a standard centric roadmap to solve interoperability? That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of maybe the like one reason why it will be harder, and I don't know if this is the case, but if there are like competing standards and like some layer 2s or some projects are pushing for different standards, I think that can make it harder. But you know, if like the standards that we've been talking about here are like just like the prevalent kind of consensus that it's a way forward, then that should be easier. But I don't know if there's like actually any competing standards out there.
I agree that a standard war, and like literally I've talked to like the Ethereum Foundation about this too, a standard war it would be bad.
Yeah.
So like, how do you avoid a standard war? I mean, the people that are building these standards need to be open-minded, right? And like add feedback and additional results. And I think that's cool. One very specific kind of example of how we are avoiding like a standard war, some engineers at Coinbase are working on a really interesting technology for interoperability that is another 4-digit number, 7755. And it's actually a lower level way to send messages in a trust minimized way between L2s. And we're working on a proof of concept that shows how this standard for intents, 7683, can work seamlessly with 7755, and like these pieces all fit together. So this is like super nerdy. All your listeners are probably being like, why is this guy saying 4-digit numbers on repeat? But the idea is like, I do think Ethereum has an ethos of like, hey, we just want to solve the problem and figure out the best solution. And I don't know, let's try to just put ego aside and build in the right direction. And maybe we just all listen to what Vitalik says. Maybe that's the other thing we do.
Yeah, like seriously, it sucks, but I do think some centralization actually helps these hard coordination problems. Vitalik or the EF, I think would really, I think it would be really helpful if they came out and said like, okay, like this is what we're going to do. Like this is the path forward. And I think people, like all the different players, will be more likely to rally behind like a specific set of standards instead of just like, fighting over which standard to use. And I don't know, I think like the risk is that Ethereum just like loses market share in the process, and people kind of get tired of the bad UX and just like go to other chains. And, I think it's a real risk.
It is. Cami, I'll be like the ETH bull on your podcast. I mean, there is, we have the building blocks. We have a clear path. Put across the side. Let's think about it like from Uniswap's perspective. This standard for 7683, I mean, we've got 25 partners like supporting it. And I shouldn't even say we, because it's not my standard, right? It's like Uniswap, it's half theirs. Like, but there's it's all these 25 people now. It's an open standard that we've got a lot of support for. I think we can coordinate to solve this. I think it's truly possible because we like showcase a good experience, showcase something that works really well, and then just like people want it. So I'm going to be the ETH bull and be on your podcast and say, yeah, we have a massive interoperability problem. I do think we can solve it. I don't think it's going to take us 4 years to solve. I think it's going to take us next year to solve. And I will make the prediction that by the end, or hopefully even sooner than that, but by the end of 2025 at least, Ethereum will feel like one unified network again. And the UX and all the pieces to just make it be like, I click a button and in 2 seconds, the thing I wanted to have happen on Ethereum, whatever chain it's on, happens. That should be the North Star. And I think we really can kind of like do that. Okay.
We'll have you back on the podcast at the end of 2025 and see whether your prediction played out or not. I actually, I'm playing a bit of a devil's advocate just because I'm just like so annoyed at people not like arguing about this. Just people saying, no, it's not too bad. That's what kind of like triggered me. That's why I think I'm being a little bit kind of like,
Come on, you're like the least negative person out there. Yeah. You're saying the quiet part out loud. It is bad. Using all these L2s is bad. Building an app chain right now, it's kind of an insane or very scary thought, because I build an app chain and I have this horrendous onboarding experience for my new users. Like, that's bad. I don't want that, right?
Yeah. But my point was, like, even though, like, I'm just annoyed at people even arguing that this is not the case, I do agree that Ethereum has a track record of solving hard problems. And I think the community and ecosystem is able to coordinate for something bigger. And this is a huge problem. So yeah, I'm also bullish that Ethereum will figure this out. But then we'll run into the next problem.
That is the way of the world.
Yeah,
that's right. But yeah, it would be fun. Like, end of 2025, I would love to come back on here, and we can either be jubilant together, be like, we solved the hard problem, and then be like, ugh, what's the next hard problem to solve? Or I'll be like jaded and depressed that it's like been really hard to solve. So it'll be one of the two.
Okay, we shall see. Hart, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.